Have you ever wondered why siblings look similar but not identical? The answer lies in heredity, genes, and variation.
Welcome to Teaching Science. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating topics in Class 10 Science, hereditary. We're going to go through Chapter 8 of your NCERT book step by step, taking all that complex science and breaking it down into super logical, easy-to-digest pieces. By the end of this lesson, you are going to be fully prepared for your board exams. So let's just jump right in. Now, have you ever wondered why some of us have attached earlobes while others have free ones? Or why your eyes might be the exact same shade of brown as your grandfather's? You know, we all share a basic human body design, but it's those subtle little differences that make us entirely unique. Today, we're going to unlock the biological secrets behind these physical variations. Let's actually look at a brilliant example right out of your NCERT book, Activity 8.1. Here we have two types of earlobes, free on the left and attached on the right. If you look around your classroom, you'll definitely see both variations among your friends. And these variations aren't just random, they're passed down from our parents. By looking at your earlobe type and comparing it with your parents' earlobes, we actually get to see the very real, observable rules of inheritance right in front of our eyes. But there's a really important distinction we need to make between the traits we're born with and the ones we pick up along the way. Think about this. If your mother gets her ears pierced, will you be born with pierced ears? No way, right? That's what we call an acquired trait. You acquire it during your lifetime. It's like getting a scar or learning how to ride a bicycle. These things absolutely do not change your DNA. Inherited traits, on the other hand, like your eye color or your natural earlobe shape, well, those are written directly into your genetic code and are passed down from generation to generation. Section 1. Mendel's contributions, the rules of inheritance. So how exactly do these inherited traits get passed down? For the longest time, this was a massive biological mystery. Enter Gregor John Mendel, who is universally known as the father of genetics. Mendel did something completely brilliant. Over a century ago, he beautifully blended his knowledge of science with mathematics. By experimenting with garden peas, because they had really clear contrasting traits like being very tall or very short, he became the very first person to mathematically count how traits are passed down in each generation. Let's walk step by step through his famous monohybrid cross. That just means tracking one single trait at a time. In step 1, Mendel took a pure tall pea plant and crossed it with a pure short pea plant. Now, what do you think happened in step 2, the F1 or first generation? You'd probably guess they all became medium height, right? But nope, every single plant was completely tall. There were no halfway characteristics at all. It was literally as if the short trait had just vanished. Then, in step 3, he let those F1 tall plants self-pollinate to create the F2 generation. And this brings us to a super important definition for your board exams. Because the tall trait completely took over in that first generation, Mendel called it the dominant trait. We represent this with a capital letter, like a big T. The short trait, which was completely hidden or suppressed, is called the recessive trait, represented by a small t. Basically, a dominant trait only needs one copy to show up physically, while a recessive trait needs two identical copies to actually express itself. Okay, you'll want to star this in your notes because this is a huge board alert. When Mendel self-pollinated those F1 tall plants, the shortness trait suddenly reappeared in the F2 generation. Exactly 1/4 of the plants were short. This gives us our highly tested ratios. The phenotypic ratio, which is how the plants physically look to our eyes, is 3 tall to 1 short. But the genotypic ratio, which is their actual invisible genetic makeup, is 1 pure tall to 2 mixed tall to 1 pure short. Here's a really handy exam tip for you. Why didn't the genetic codes just blend together like paint? Well, this is explained by the law of segregation. It states that during reproduction, when germ cells, or gametes, are formed, the gene pairs physically separate. This means a single gamete is entirely pure. It carries only a big T or a small t, but never both. They segregate nicely so that they can recombine perfectly in the offspring. All right, let's level up a bit. What happens when we track two traits at once? This is what we call a dihybrid cross. Mendel crossed plants that had round yellow seeds with plants that had wrinkled green seeds. And in the F2 generation, something absolutely amazing happened. He saw the original combinations, sure, but he also saw entirely new combinations. He saw round green seeds and wrinkled yellow seeds. The traits had completely mixed and matched. And this brilliantly illustrates our next important definition, the law of independent assortment. Simply put, inheriting one specific trait, like the shape of the seed, does not force the inheritance of another specific trait, like the color of the seed. They're inherited completely independently of one another. Just like your eye color doesn't dictate your hair color, they sort themselves out independently. Section 2. How do these traits get expressed? So the real question here is, we've talked a ton about capital T's and small t's, but how do these math-like letters actually turn into a physical, living trait? Well, think of your cellular DNA as a master recipe book. A specific section of that DNA is called a gene. That gene provides the information to make a specific protein, like an enzyme. If the gene is perfectly coded, it makes a super efficient enzyme. That enzyme then pumps out a lot of plant growth hormone, which finally results in the physical trait of a tall plant. But if the DNA has an alteration, the enzyme is less efficient, the hormone levels drop, and the plant remains short. So basically, DNA makes proteins, and proteins make you.
But how does this inheritance actually happen physically in the body? You see, DNA isn't just one long, tangled thread. It's neatly organized into separate pieces called chromosomes. In normal cells, you have 2 copies of each chromosome. But when the body makes germ cells, those are the cells used for reproduction, they only take one single chromosome from each pair. When the male and female germ cells combine during fertilization, they restore the normal paired number, beautifully ensuring the stability of the DNA for the entire species.
Section 3. Human sex determination. Now let's transition to a topic that is always incredibly fascinating and highly tested in exams: human sex determination. How exactly is the gender of a newborn decided biologically? Before we talk about humans, did you know that different species have entirely different strategies for this? For some reptiles, it's totally environmental. The actual temperature at which their eggs are incubated determines if the baby will be male or female. Crazy, right? Certain snails can even change their sex during their lifetime. However, for us human beings, our sex is strictly and permanently determined by our genetics at the exact moment of fertilization. In humans, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. The first 22 pairs are perfectly matched up, but that 23rd pair, known as the sex chromosomes, is where the real magic happens. Females possess a perfect pair of large chromosomes, which we call XX. Males, however, possess a mismatched pair, one normal-sized X chromosome and one much shorter chromosome called Y. So to keep it simple, females are XX and males are XY. So here's a really thought-provoking question for you. If a mother is exclusively XX and a father is XY, who exactly is biologically responsible for determining the sex of the child? Think about it for a second. Let's trace the genetic logic together to find the answer. Let's break it down step by step. When germ cells form, remember, the pair split. The mother, who is XX, can only ever pass down an X chromosome in her egg. She literally has nothing else to give. But the father, who is XY, produces sperm that either carry an X or carry a Y. If the father's X chromosome fertilizes the egg, the baby is XX, which is a girl. If the father's Y chromosome fertilizes the egg, the baby is XY, which is a boy. And this brings us to a massive common mistake, and frankly, a pervasive societal myth. In many places, mothers are unfortunately blamed if they don't give birth to a boy. But the absolute scientific truth is that females have zero genetic role in deciding the gender. Males, by providing either the X or the Y chromosome, are exclusively genetically responsible for the sex of the child. It's purely science, and honestly, it's a fantastic fact to educate others about. Section 4. Chapter End, Revision, and Exam Prep. And just like that, you have mastered the core high-level concepts of heredity. Huge congratulations. But we're not done just yet. Let's smoothly transition into our exam prep so you can absolutely lock down those marks. Here is your brain-boosting 1-minute recap. Heredity is the reliable passing of traits from one generation to the next. Mendel used garden peas to discover the rules. We learned the traits can be dominant, taking over, or recessive, staying hidden. We discovered that genes act as cellular instructions to make proteins, which literally build your physical traits. And finally, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes where the father's X or Y chromosome ultimately determines the biological sex of the child. I highly recommend you grab a screenshot of this premium visual card right now. This is your formula box for the chapter. These specific ratios from Mendel's experiments are practically guaranteed to show up on your board exams. Memorize the monohybrid 3-to-1 physical look, its 1-to-2-to-1 genetic code, and that massive 9-to-3-to-3-to-1 ratio for the dihybrid cross showing independent assortment. You're going to need them for sure. Finally, I want to leave you with this highly tested, really thought-provoking NCERT question to solve on your own. If trait A is found in 10% of a population of an asexually reproducing species, and trait B is found in 60%, which trait likely arose earlier? Think about how traits accumulate and spread over time. Work on that, and if you found this lesson helpful, please like, share, subscribe to Teaching Science, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss our next CBSE Science lesson. Keep revising, practice those crosses, and I will see you in the next lesson.